Hi, welcome all. I'm Faith, your librarian moderator from Woodson Regional Library. And on behalf of the Chicago Public Library, welcome to Speak On It, a conversation connecting teens with successful authors. And today we have Nicola Yoon, author born in Jamaica, grew up in Brooklyn, New York. She is the #1 New York New York Times bestselling author of Everything, Everything, and The Sun is also a star. She is a National Book Award finalist, a Michael L. Prince Honor Book recipient, and a Coretta Scott King New Talent Award winner. Both her novels have been made into major motion pictures. Everything, Everything hit the screens in 2017, and The Sun is also a star hit the screens in 2019. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
She currently lives in Los Angeles with her family, her husband, and her daughter. Hi, Nicola.
Hi, thanks for having me, and thanks for the really, really nice introduction.
Of course. Welcome. So you wrote 2 novels, and I think it's interesting because I read a little bit about you, read your biography, and it says that you majored in electrical engineering at the university.
Yeah, I did.
Wow. How did you become an author? How did you go from an electrical engineering major to becoming an author?
Okay, so it's kind of a funny story. So in high school, I was really good at math. And the thing I always say to everyone is math led me astray because it sort of led me away from the arts, right? So I was really good at math in high school. And then in college, I decided to major in electrical engineering because it's very math heavy. And I loved math. And so I did that, all through college. And then my senior year at Cornell, one of the things they make you do is take a class outside of your major of your senior year. And so I thought I'd take creative writing because I thought it would be easy because I was obnoxious, right? Because I was like, I've been doing partial differential equations for 4 years. How hard could creative writing be? And it was the hardest class I ever took. Wow. It was, because you have to put everything into it, right? You put your whole heart into it. For me anyway, I wasn't doing that with electrical engineering. But at the time, I was in love with this boy who did not love me back at all. So I was suffering through unrequited love. And so for this class, I wrote bad short stories, and I wrote bad one-act plays, and I wrote I put bad everything about this boy. And then I had a meeting with my professor, one of those one-on-one, meetings. Mm-hmm. And she said, "You're eventually going to get over this boy." And I was like, "No, never going to." And then she said, and I said, "You have potential." And she really liked my writing. And she was totally right about the boy. I totally got over him, right? But I fell in love with writing, and that was it. It was the senior year of college, and I was like, I majored in the wrong thing. What am I going to do now? So eventually I went to work for a few years, and then I went to graduate school and majored in creative writing. So the question, it's not like I went back to writing from engineering. It's that I should have been writing in the first place, right? Math, it's bad for you kids. Stay away from it.
Wow. So were you always did you ever have a slight interest in writing before then, or was that just something completely new for you?
No, I had, because a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago at this point, I found my old diary from when I was a kid. Wow. I think I was 8 or 9, and it said, "I want to be a writer when I grow up." So at some point I did know, right? At some point, and then I forgot about it. I mean, I'm teasing, but part of it, honestly, is that I was very poor. We were very poor when I was a kid. And I just didn't think you could make it as a writer. I didn't think that writing is something that you could do, right? And so being good at math and being able to go into computer science and, I got a job while I was still in college, you know what I mean? I was recruited because it's one of those industries where it's so stable and I could be guaranteed an income. I never thought I could make a living as a writer, right? There was no one who was going to pay me to do that. So, I tease about the math, but, there's some practicality too. It was just this is a thing that you can depend on. You can't depend on writing, really, right? That's what I thought anyway.
Right? I was about to be like, well, you got like 2 bestsellers and like 2 movies. I'm not, it looks like it worked out for you.
Right. And there's so much, I mean, obviously I worked really hard, right? But I mean, you do get lucky. There is luck involved in everything. And, like I've had such good luck with like my editor and the people who have sort of championed me. So there is a lot of luck involved too.
Oh, wow. So when you were writing the books, did you so you knew that writing was probably not a reliable career, but while you were writing the books, did you ever imagine that it would be this successful? Did you imagine having the impact that you had?
No. No, I had no idea. I mean, I didn't. So when I wrote Everything, I was still working my full-time job. So I wrote that book from 4 to 6 a.m. every day for 3 years, right?
Wow.
Because, yeah, and I started writing it when my little girl was 4 months old. So I would get up, write for a couple hours. She would wake up sometimes, and I would feed her, put her back to bed, and then keep writing and then go to work. And as I said, because I grew up poor, it was one of those things where I was not going to quit my day job without thinking that maybe this was going to be successful. I just didn't poverty is so destabilizing. I wanted to be stable. You know what I mean? And I was a vice president at my old job, and I was doing well, and I wasn't going to sort of jeopardize our whole family. And so I stayed there until I had this idea that maybe it was going to be successful. I understood that the publisher was putting a lot into it. And my husband wanted me to quit anyway. He's like, just give it a chance. Just, take a year and just see how it goes. And so he was really supportive too. But I had no idea. I did not think it would hit #1. I didn't think that I'd be the first Black woman ever to hit #1 on the young adult list. I mean, this was 2015, and I was thrilled by that, but also that's insane that it's 2015. It takes so long. I mean, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And then they made a movie. I mean, the whole thing, I still feel like that, just this is all surreal. And it's only recently that I've gotten over the idea that somehow I'm going to get sucked back into my old job, so I have a little bit of who knows what's going to happen next, right? But yeah, I mean, I had no idea, but I'm infinitely grateful for it.
That's amazing. So speaking of being the first Black woman to make the New York bestseller list, do you think, several of your biographies mention that you're a part of the We Need Diverse Books organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the work you do with them?
Right. So We Need Diverse Books was started by Ellen O, and Daniel Clayton is a COO now, and Lamar Giles. And so the whole point of the organization is to promote diversity within young adult literature. And I always do this little spiel about why we need diversity. And
that's why.
What?
I was going to ask why. Why do you feel very passionate about it? You have to be everywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, just when I was a kid growing up, I didn't see people that looked like me in books, right? And I read all the time. And the first time I saw myself in a book was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And I remember being a voracious reader, reading that book and thinking, oh my God, there's a Black girl and she's the star of the book. I mean, I remember being shocked by that, and thinking it was about her, it was for her. Her entire interior life was the whole reason for the book. And I just remember just being really shook. I was like, wait, you can do that? And I was older when that happened, and that shouldn't be, right? I have a little girl, and my husband's Korean American, and I want her to see herself in books. I don't want her to have that same experience. Books tell you, books are these empathy machines, right? And they tell you what your possibilities are, and they show you other worlds. And all kids deserve to see themselves like the hero of a story, right? And so, I mean, that's why it's important. We live in a beautiful, diverse world, so our stories need to be like that. And the thing that I always say is there's some ridiculous number of species of butterflies. It's over 50. And no one would ever say, we want fewer species, right? No one would say the world would be better if we only had one type, right? And that's the same thing, right? The world is better because of its diversity, and not just because food's delicious from other cultures, right? I mean, it just is better. And so our media needs to reflect that. And so that's like the mission of Really Diverse Books.
Yeah. And the world is certainly more interesting with the diversity as well.
It is. I mean, think about all the things you can learn and just, I mean, not even just learn, just be, you know?
Exactly. So speaking of B and your daughter, I read that your first book, Everything, Everything, was inspired by your first time experience as a mom.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So let's see, I started writing when she was 4 months, 3 months, whatever. I was one of these like people, and I still am like this. I'm a very, like, I worry all the time about everything. And after I had her, I worried. I was a ball of worry, right? So like all the sort of newborn, like the new mom fears where, you know, she's going to crawl on the ground, she's going to eat dirt, and like bad things are going to happen, and you're not good enough at taking care of her, and all of this stuff. And in my worry, one of the things I thought was, you know, what if I had to take care of her forever the way you take care of like a 3 or 4 month old? Like, what if it's always that sort of delicate and precarious? And so I thought about that for a while in a horrified state. And then I thought, well, what would life be like for a girl who needed to be taken care of like that? And so that's when it really started. It was like, what would life be like for someone who had to live in a kind of a bubble? So yeah, my little girl is the reason for that book and my whole career.
Oh, wow. One of my favorite quotes from that book is actually, maybe growing up means disappointing the people that we love.
Yeah.
Can you tell, that feels like a very relevant like life quote. Do you ever like apply your quotes from your books to like your real life?
Yeah, I mean, there's always something of you in the books, right? So like everything comes from a place of like just sort of real, genuine fear. You know, the other part of the story is when I first met my husband in graduate school, like I knew he was the one, right? Like I just was like, this is my boy, we are all set, right? But after we got together, the next thing that happened to me is I started worrying about him, right? So if he was late for anything, I was convinced that something bad had happened.
Oh, wow.
Right, so I'm like terrible like this. And then when we had our little girl, it was like twofold, right? And you know, it's just like your heart exists outside of your body, right? And you just you're like, I want my people, I just need them. And so the question in that book is like, you know, can you survive loss, and what happens to you when you lose things? And so there's always a part of me, like in the books, even if the stories are like outlandish or, you know, everyone hates the mom and everything, I don't hate her. But you know, maybe growing up disappointing means disappointing. It is true. Like for Maddie, when she grows up, you have to separate from your parents, right? And when I was growing up, I had to separate from my parents. Like, and it's necessary in order to grow. And they're not always going to love the things you do, which doesn't make the thing you do wrong. It just means that you have to be you, right? And so I've definitely experienced that in my life, you know, like sort of disappointing people, sometimes for the better, like I made the right decision, and sometimes for the worse, you know, I have done, as have we all, the wrong thing. But it's part of growing and learning.
Yeah. You mentioned your husband quite a few times. I heard that.
I go at him all the time. I'm sorry, it's such a bad habit.
No, it's okay. He's your love. So I had a question about him, so I'm like, well, let's go ahead and talk about hubby.
Yeah.
So you mentioned on your website that he was a graphic designer, and I also actually read his book, Frankly in Love. And then he had another book come out this year called Super Fake Love Song.
It's coming out on this Tuesday.
Oh, okay, cool. So how is that? How is that having two authors in the house?
Mental. You know what? It's fine. We met in graduate school for writing, so that it's the way we know each other. You know, like we were in our first writing workshops together. He would critique my stories, I would critique his. Like, you know, at the big sort of creative writing table, and so I mean, I don't know how else to be, because that's how we know each other in the first place. So we walk around the house talking about stories all the time, and he reads my things first and I read his first. Like if I'm stuck, I go, honey, this is what's happening and I don't know what to do. And he does the same thing for me. So, that was our first introduction to each other, was like, I fell in love with him partly because I fell in love with his writing, because I thought he was such a good writer.
Wow.
So, it's not mental. Like I could not imagine not being married to someone who was not a writer, because it's such a part of our relationship now. Do you know? It's just, we tell stories to each other, to our kid all the time. It's just part of it. Like we'll just sit at the table and just make stuff up. So, it's totally fine. It's great. I really love it.
Well, so I have to ask, was The Sun is Also a Star, was that inspired by your relationship with your husband?
This is the question I get the most, I will tell you.
I'm curious.
I know, but it is absolutely not autobiographical, like, at all.
Wow. Okay. Well, there was several correlations between you and
right.
the
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of the stuff in there, like the sort of moments in our lives, like we do go karaokeing, or we did before COVID, right? Like we do that. And like all the cultural stuff, that stuff is true, right? And like when I was writing it, I had him read it and my in-laws read it and cousins read it, just like to get all that sort of cultural stuff correct. But like, we didn't like fall in love over the course of 12 hours in New York City either, right? Like there was no threat of deportation. So like all that stuff was made up. But, some of the stuff about our lives, like they talk about philosophy a lot. Dave and I do that all the time. So some of that stuff is real, but like, we didn't do like the 30 something questions to fall in love or anything like that.
That was actually one of my favorite parts of the whole book.
That I got a New York Times article. There's a New York Times article about these researchers who did that actual questionnaire, and the researchers ended up falling in love. And I thought it was so great that I put it into the book.
Wow, so that's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real study.
Now I have to go look it up.
It's great. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you so you talk about like telling stories a lot. So do you like have your own personal library at home? Like, does your daughter have a personal library too? Like, I'm sure your house is filled with books.
Oh my God. I'm just going to turn this a little bit.
Okay.
Library.
Wow.
So there.
That's amazing.
And my daughter has one too.
Wow.
So she's like a wall of books. If she doesn't end up being a writer, I'll eat my hand, because she writes stories now. She tells us stories before. It's constant. Like it's almost exhausting. You're like, honey, be quiet. But yeah, we have a lot of books in our house.
Wow. So I looked into your Instagram page.
Yeah.
Sorry. I do my research.
Yeah.
And I saw that you made like several, like you make a lot of recommendations for like other books. So like, do you have like, what are you reading right now?
Okay, so the book that I'm recommending, let me just see if it's here, because I'm going to grab it 1 second.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, this is a book that I want everyone in the entire world to read. So this is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. It's, the New York Times said this is the kind of book that changes the weather inside of a person. And it's absolutely true, and it's also one of the nicest quotes I've ever heard someone say about a book. Changes the weather inside a person, and I really super believe it does. And this is the book that I love. I've read it, I've listened to it. It's Oprah's book club pick, and I've gone through and listened to her talk to Isabella, and then she did a podcast about it. I listened to all of those. Like, I am in. This book is amazing. So this is the book. I'm not even going to say no other one. This is the one.
Okay. I'm going to make note of that title.
Oh, good. So unbelievable.
Okay. Are you working on like a new book?
I am.
Okay.
And there's something on my Instagram today.
Oh.
Out the new book. So yeah, I have, it's done. I'm going through first pass pages. So first pass pages are, you write the manuscript and then it gets copy edited, so they fix all your terrible grammar and ask you, check facts and stuff like that. So we've gone through that process, and now first pass is when it's like one of your final read-throughs to see, do you want to change the sentence? And is there a spelling mistake we missed? Is there a comma we missed? That sort of thing. So I have those pages now. There's a huge stack of them, and it's due back to my editor on Tuesday. And this baby's getting printed pretty soon. And we'll do like a cover reveal and title reveal like in the next few months or so.
Oh, I'll be looking forward to it. Is it true that you handwrite all of your first drafts?
It is. It is. I'm looking around the room to see if I have my stack, but I do not see it. I do. Hold on. Okay, so I write into notebooks like this, and everything is like 10 of these, and the set is also started 7, and the new book is like 12 of these notebooks.
Wow.
And if you can't see my terrible handwriting, that's it.
So what's the process? Do you like divide the books up? Oh, I'm sorry.
Say it again. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was asking, so is each notebook like a chapter, or like what's your process?
So each notebook, it just goes until I get to the end, right? So it has several chapters, or, it has notes in there. It has my outlines in there. So it's just everything about the book. And I write by hand, and then I read like 2 or 3 days. I type it in, so I'll sit on my computer and type in and so it's like my first sort of mini revision, And honestly, I've tried to get away from this process because it takes so long, but I'm unable to. It's just the way my mind works. And when I'm writing by hand, I'm really freer. All the weird things I'll write down and I don't judge them. And somehow when I get to the computer, my editor brain is on, and I'm like, but that's not helpful when you're first making something for me. And so feel free, I just write by hand, and then because it's just paper and I can always just cross it out. For some reason, being on the computer feels more like, now this is what it is. So that's why I do it.
Okay.
It's weird.
You said, no, it's not weird. I mean, everybody has a different, everybody has a different process. My poems.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, speaking of poetry, you, a lot of your, and you also brought up philosophy as well. A lot of the second book, The Sun is Also a Star. I'm sorry. It has a lot of philosophical, poetic, I couldn't pick a favorite quote because all of it was just so juicy.
Thank you.
Have you ever dabbled in poetry before, or did you just kind of pull from the philosophical background of
So I love poetry, actually. So I read a lot of it, but I'm terrible at writing it. Once every couple of years, I'll write one really good poem, but that's it. So maybe by the end of my writing career, I'll have 10, and I'll put a very small volume out. But I love it. I love poetry. I think poets are so precise, and what they can do in such a small amount of language, the feeling they can evoke and the images. It's amazing. So I read it because I love it, but I also read it for inspiration. Right? They're just, the poets don't mess around, man. Those guys know language. There's no room for there's just no room for error. You just got to get the right word. And I love it because of that.
Wow. Well, since you've become so popular and so famous, have you had a chance to meet any other famous authors or poets that you admire?
Well, I haven't met any poets, but I've met a lot of authors that I just love to death. I think the first famous author that I met that I was really uncool with was Rowell. Because I just hugged her without asking her the first time. I was just and she was very gracious. So she was very kind. Let's see, who else Jason Reynolds is fantastic. One of my best friends is Sabah Tahir. Marie Lu and, you know, like Angie, there's Nick Stone and Angie Thomas. And like, I mean, I know a lot of people now because we are all in the same industry. It never gets old, I have to tell you. Like, you still always, like, especially when you're like a big fan, like you just really, really fangirl. And I hope that doesn't get old. I finally met John Green like maybe a couple months ago, and I was just like, oh my God, John Green. You know, like, oh, not a couple months ago, 7 months ago, because it was like my last event before COVID hit. And that was really exciting. So like, it doesn't, you know, the inner fangirl, like the big reader in me still finds it amazing that I get to talk to these people and meet them and like, be their peer.
That's awesome. Well, we have 4 minutes left, and I have to ask you 2 questions that I ask all of my authors.
Yes.
So the first question is, which book are you most proud of and why?
You know, it's an impossible question, right?
I know. They're all your babies. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm going to say the one that's coming out because it was the hardest one to write. I wrote it while my mom was very sick. She's like recovering now, but she was sick for about 2 years, like seriously in the hospital sick. And so I wrote another book that is never going to get published before I wrote this one. So this is the book I fought the hardest for. And it saw me through a very difficult time. So I'm going to choose this one because I worked for this one. Like, I mean, I worked for them all, but this one almost killed me. No joke. But it's done now.
Okay. Well, now I really look forward to seeing it come out in a few weeks. So for young, aspiring African-American authors, especially, given the climate of today, what words of wisdom or advice would you offer them?
All right. There's a thing that I always say, and then just something for this moment, I think. So I think that American society in general is really good at putting people into boxes, right? And especially Black girls, honestly. Like, you are supposed to like this, you're supposed to be like this, you're supposed to look like this, you're supposed to sound like this. We're really good at just sort of putting you in a box. And I'm here to tell you, screw the box, right? You gotta just do what you want. Don't hurt anyone, but do not let anyone put you in a box. Do not let anyone tell you who you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to love and what you're supposed to like. You get to be an entire human being, right? You get to have the full measure of your humanity. And I think it's such a hard thing to be told all the time what's expected of you. So, I mean, let your freak flag fly, you know, just let it fly. Don't let anyone tell you what you can be. And then the next thing I would say, that especially in this moment, in the country and the moment we're in, it's so easy to get depressed. I get depressed when you read the news, right? I mean, there are people who will deny your humanity and also your bodily autonomy, right? I mean, so it's a real, not just like a philosophical who you can be, but like, will harm your body. And so, number one, be safe. But number two, you have to know who you are on the inside. Do you know, don't get into arguments with people who don't think that you deserve to exist. Who cares? Don't dwell on it. Like, those people are not worth your time, I promise you. You blow by them. If you take a moment to feel the sadness or whatever, that's great, but you deserve joy. Do not wallow in it. Don't let it drag you down. Still do your thing. You know, like, I can't wake up every day thinking about the struggle. Otherwise, life is short and I would be miserable, right? I gotta kiss my baby, right? I gotta kiss her face. I gotta kiss David's face. I gotta like talk, you know, I gotta be on these calls and talk to people and listen to, like, people say, your book changed my life, right? Like, if I'm depressed, I can't make art, right? And no one who's like dumber than me gets to take that away from me, right? You just don't. So try to find like a hard candy shell around your heart, you know, for people, against people like that. I mean, don't make it too hard because you need to experience the world. But, you know, it's a balance. It's so hard, especially right now. But they're not worth your time. You were too brilliant. You can change the whole world, and you can't do it if you're paying too much attention to people who are not worth your time. So that's what I would say.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I am inspired. Yeah. You deserve joy. I love that. That's a great that's a great way to wrap us up today. Thank you so much, Nicola.
This was great. This was so like breezy. I'm surprised we're done already. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Well, you.
I'm glad that you enjoyed yourself. And thank you to my audience, whoever's watching out there. Next week, Wednesday, we'll have an interview with A.S. King, author of Dig and Reality Boy and other novels. Same time, right here at 4:00 p.m. We look forward to you all joining us again. Thank you. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you. Bye.